Now in the last part, we got our offer accepted and we're in the beginning parts of getting a house. But as you will soon find out, there is so much that goes on when it comes to closing an actual house. You're gonna find out. What's up? I'm Brandon Young, and on this channel I teach you how to make, save, and invest money. So if you're new here, consider subscribing and don't forget to hit that bell so you don't miss a beat. Now before we talk about some of the steps in the actual process, I want to go over some of the loan options that you may have. Now although there are a lot of options that people may have for you, the two most popular options that we have is called an FHA loan and they have a conventional loan. Now an FHA loan is usually given out by an FHA approved lender and it is backed by the Federal Housing Administration. Now FHA is usually used by people that have lower to moderate income, as well as people that have lower credit scores, as well as they prefer to have a lower down payment compared to the conventional loan. Now, a conventional mortgage or any type of conventional loan is usually not backed by a government entity. So it's usually a private lender or a private mortgage company, etc., etc. So these aren't backed by an actual government. This is why you tend to see banks give more conventional loans compared to FHA loans, because banks, credit unions, mortgage companies, etc., etc., those are pretty much private money and they aren't government money, so they will tend to give you more conventional loans. Now I don't want to get too much into the FHA, the conventional. I'll probably make a separate video talking about that, but I just wanted to give you kind of an understanding of the two different most used loans in the process. I will, however, tell you which one I use, which was the FHA loan. Now, the reason why I used this was, one, it seemed like it was readily available. Two, it required a lower credit rating, even though my credit is pristine. You do, however, need to be home occupied with this property for at least 1 year before you can actually do this loan again. So realistically, you can do this once a year and you don't have a problem doing it. Now, as you know, we got our offer accepted, so congrats to you if you got your offer accepted. But the first step, the first thing you want to do is you want to call your team or your real estate team, whatever you want to call it. You want to call up the big dogs. You want to call up your team. I also want to mention, we live in a generation where people don't let their successes happen first before they start to speak about them. Do not post this on your IG or Facebook and all that stuff until your actual transaction has gone through. I must stress this because a lot can go wrong in this actual process where your deal falls through and you do not get the house. You want to make sure that you've actually gone through the closing, you've signed on that paper, and it officially says that it's yours before you put anything out there, just to keep it in mind. Now, once your offer is accepted and things are moving into motion, it is what we call under contract. Now, to those of you who are new to the game, you may not know what a real estate team is. Now, your real estate team is going to consist of a few people. Now, this is going to consist of your realtor, your agent, your attorney, your lender, your actual home inspector, any contractors that you may have. Anybody that's essentially a part of this transaction is a part of your real estate team. Now, if you have a good agent like I do, they will typically connect you with these types of people because they do a lot of transactions on a daily basis. So obviously they are going to have an address book full of these people, and they'll have a consistent team that they usually work with from a day-to-day basis. So they'll usually give you the numbers to reach out to these people to have them form your real estate team. But obviously, if that is not the case, you're gonna have to go around and start looking for these people, which is gonna make things a little hard, because then you're gonna have to go through the trust process, seeing if you can actually have a business relationship with them, and sometimes that's kind of hard. So sometimes it's easier just having your agent do it, because they'll worked with them before, they can vouch for their trustworthiness and trust for their work ethic, etc., etc. Now you want to call all of your real estate team, let them know that you just got an offer accepted, and you want to know what steps that each one wants you to take, what tasks that you need to complete, so you are ahead of the game, so things in the actual process don't get stalled because you're waiting on one portion of the actual thing to go through. You want to make sure that you speak to all of them, let them know, is there anything that you need from me, which is going to obviously speed up the process and make sure that things run smoothly. When you're calling a lot of your real estate team, things that you may ask them, maybe for the contractor, you want to ask for estimates because something in the house is messed up already that you might particularly want to fix in the long run. Maybe your attorney, you want to ask him what are his fees, is there any paperwork, is there anything that he needs you to bring to him. Or for the home inspector, you want to ask him his availability, what's his schedule looking like, so he can come in and do that house inspection. Things of that sort are the things that you want to actually ask your real estate team. Now, the next step in this process is you want to give your earnest money. Now, in this particular case, my agent gave me the number to an attorney that he closely works with, so I had somebody in my corner to take care of all my legal action and look over the contracts and stuff. But when it comes to earnest money, you want to make sure that you give this in as soon as possible. Now, for those of you who don't know what earnest money is, essentially it is a deposit to the actual seller of the house. Basically lets them know that you mean business, that you're serious about the transaction, as well as you want to get this done. It's good to know that this money isn't actually like taken from you, so it is actually applied in the transaction later on. They're not just taking some money from you and just keeping it. It's actually going to get deducted from the actual sales price of the transaction. So that money is actually money that you're paying towards the transaction. It's just that early money to just let the seller know that you got the funds, you trying to get this transaction to go through just as much as they want it to go through. So let's do it. Now, the funny story about this earnest money, essentially, remember in the first video when I had mentioned that I was the second offer and there was another offer ahead of me? Well, what happened to him was he didn't give in his earnest money fast enough. So usually they say that you want to give your earnest money between maybe 7 to 10 days, which I see is pretty long. But you want to do this process as soon as possible, because if you're just like dragging your feet, not giving in the money, the seller may be like, oh, maybe this guy's not serious, and then they'll move on to the next offer, which is what they did with me. With me, I typically gave in my earnest money in like 2 days. Like I wasn't playing no games. And typically why it kind of took the 2 days was I had to mail it all the way to the title company or whatever, and I was sending it over UPS, and it was over the weekend, so COVID was going on, so shipping times were slower. So a lot of things, a lot of moving things were going in there that slowed down the process. But typically I was able to give the money in within 2 days. Now, with the earnest money, you want to make sure that you either have your agent get it from you and give it to the seller, or you have your attorney get it from you and give it to the seller. You don't want to usually give it to the seller directly, because sometimes if there's no actual information or anything tallied down to say that, hey, they gave me the money, sometimes legal action can happen. So you want to just make sure that you give it to the attorney so the attorney can handle that. So just in case anything happens, you can be like, hey, I gave you the money, I gave you the earnest money to give to them, so what's going on with that? Now, the earnest money is usually sent through cashier's check, usually never cash. I don't recommend giving anybody any type of everything in just full cash. But usually they'll ask you for a cashier's check. But always check with your attorney or your agent to see how the transaction is actually placed, and do they want a cashier's check, a regular check, etc., etc. Now, once they've received that earnest money, they will usually kind of settle and they'll get a little ease towards them, because they know, okay, he sent his money and he's pretty serious about this. I don't gotta worry about any funny business happening during this transaction, because he gave me the money. He gave me some earnest money. So now, you know, they're a little settled until the contracts and stuff begin to get signed. Now, I want to throw this in here. You want to make sure when it comes to the actual down payment of getting all of this started, that you have put in enough money for all the fees that are going to be in this house. Now, this is going to include the down payment, which is what people only think is the only cost associated with getting a house, but there are so many costs associated with getting a house. So you want to have the down payment, you want to have the closing costs, you want to have the appraisal fee, you want to have the home inspection fee, you want to have the title fee. Those are pretty much the fees that you are going to pay for, but a lot of people don't know about these fees, so they aren't ready to pay for them. You need to have at least an extra 10 to 12K readily available on top of your down payment, just to make sure that you can get this thing closed. Just FYI. Honestly, one of my biggest things about this whole transaction was me not having enough actual money to fund this transaction to the end. That was like my biggest fear. So I was constantly just going to sleep like, man, I'm in this transaction, but am I gonna actually have enough money to see it through? That was my biggest thing. So just make sure that you are prepared to that. Luckily for me, I was able to sell off some of my investments and other things to be able to make sure that everything was well funded. But I wanna make sure that you are prepared when you do this, because everybody should be able to do this, but I want to make sure that you are prepared just in case when you decide to do this, that you don't get stuck in a rut and like, man, I don't have enough money to finish this out. Now, once you've done all this and you've handed in your earnest money and etc., the next thing that you're gonna move on to is usually the seller's contract. This is where you see the terms, the negotiations, all that of the actual contract between you and the seller, and you make sure everything is copacetic and everything looks good. Now, it is important that you get a great attorney that is not only just going to read the actual contract for you, but they're going to lay out every part of the contract and make sure that you understand it and let you know if there's anything that looks a little bit funny and if you're okay with that. Because when it comes to services, you want to make sure that you're not only getting your service completed, but you are getting educated on the process as well. Now, my attorney, Robert, he not only showed me the process of this actual transaction and showing me the contract, but he kind of actually taught me some steps along the way, which I greatly appreciate, because a lot of people, they're just quick to take your money and do the service, but they don't actually teach you anything. We are supposed to be teachers and help people along with giving them great service. That's just how I see it. And if you want to do this long term, it is essential that you try to learn from every single real estate deal that you do. And the way you do that is have people that will be in your corner to teach you every step of the way about contracts or different loopholes and things that you can look for in the actual contract. So just, keep that in mind. Tip alert, there is actually something in the contract process that you can add, which is called seller's concession. Now, my agent is the real MVP because he was able to secure some seller's concession for me, which is essentially, it's a gift that the seller can potentially offer the buyer to reduce the cost of actually buying the home. Now, although seller's concession can be added for a various amount of things, usually that is one of the major things why it's added, to reduce the price or reduce the cost of the house to help the actual buyer get it. Now, the seller's concession can also be put towards any closing costs or any home association fees, but layman terms, it's going to help reduce the price of your home or the amount of money you have to bring to the actual transaction, which is always a plus, because who doesn't like saving money? Now, usually once you've gotten the contract, you've signed it, it now has to go through something called attorney review. Now, what is attorney review? Attorney review is when the big wigs, which are your attorneys, go ahead, they look through the actual contract to make sure that everything is all good, that everybody approves on different things, that everything looks all right. And then we go ahead and then we would have to sign it again. Now, at this point right now, it seems like this may be the point where your contract there's no contract, because at this point the attorney is still going through it. I like to call this one of the most vital parts, because there's actually no real contract until your attorney approves it and makes sure that everything is copacetic. Although you did sign it, you want to make sure that everything looks good before you physically make the contract go through, because if everything isn't good long term, it's gonna be bad for you. We don't want you to have any issues going into your beautiful first home. We don't. Now, typically, if any of the sides, they don't like maybe a revision, or they don't like a part of the contract is misconstrued, changed up, all that, and make sure that both parties like the contract before it is eventually pushed through. Now, once you've gotten out of the attorney review, you kind of feel that breath of fresh air, because you physically have that contract again. You know that things are moving forward and things are going through, and you can kind of, sleep with a little ease, Now, the next part of this actual process is to get your actual lender documents in as soon as possible. Now, this step is actually called the underwriting process, which essentially is they verify all of your occupation, your income information, to make sure you have the funds to actually fund the closing costs and any other costs associated with this transaction. They just want to make sure you have the funds to back up what you've been saying this whole time, Usually it's your lender doing your actual underwriting process, and it's just to make sure that they should be financing you, because at the end of the day, they're gonna have to give this big, huge check to the actual seller. So they want to make sure that everything is in order, that you have the funds to actually pay your due portion of the transaction. Now, in this process, a lot is going to happen. They're going to verify your W-2s, they're going to verify your income, you're going to have to show proof of funds, you're going to need to show bank statements, the whole 9 yards. When I tell you they're going to ask you for a lot of information, but don't be scared. It's just to make sure, and they're just trying to cover their bases and make sure that they get paid, because as somebody that's giving out a large portion of money, you want to make sure that this person is going to pay you back. It makes sense as a business. So I ain't sweating it. Everybody wants to get their bread, right? Now, usually this process can take a while depending on any outstanding statements or any information that you have to bring forth to the underwriter. So that's why it is essential that you bring this information as soon as possible, so the underwriting process can go swiftly and move as fast as possible. Now that the underwriting process is taking place, and while you wait for that to process, the next thing that you're going to want to go through is the actual house inspection. Now, the home inspection is a limited, non-invasive examination of the condition of the house, often in connection with the sale of the home. So essentially, you're gonna have a guy come in with a flashlight and stuff, just look around the house, making sure that everything is great and everything is working properly. It's basically to cover yourself, because a lot of times you get this house, it looks very nice on the outside, but you don't see the underlying issues. And usually as a new homeowner or somebody that may have been living with parents for a while and stuff, you don't go ahead and you don't know the different things that go into a house. So it's good to have somebody with a lot of experience going in and knowing exactly the different places to look for the different issues, because there may be something that you kind of overlooked and you're like, oh wow, I didn't even know that was there. Like you tend to see all the issues after you've bought the house, you've been in there for a couple weeks, and then that's when the issues start to occur. So the house inspection is basically to stop that from happening. Having a great home inspector is very crucial to you being in this real estate business, because you want to make sure that they find everything that's wrong with your house. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, like, why would I want something to be wrong with my house? But you want them to find everything that's wrong with your house, because when you do that, one, you'll know kind of the issues with your house. Two, that kind of leaves you a little wiggle room. Maybe you can negotiate furthermore with the actual seller, and you can have them fix things that you won't have to come out of pocket to fix later on after you buy it, because you didn't know the issue was there. So you can have them fix those issues or potentially give you some money towards the repairs for that issue. Doesn't that sound a little better? Now, my particular home inspector, he was very thorough. Like when I was telling you, he was going through every crevice, every little crack to make sure that there were no issues with my house. And like I said, it is very good to have a home inspector like that, because you want to find everything that is wrong with the house. Now, along with the actual home inspection and him looking around and trying to find issues, it occurred that one, the electrical panel that was on, I think, the second floor, it was wired incorrectly. So where there was a 20-volt switch, there was supposed to be a 16-volt switch, which he said that if for whatever reason, if it was turned on wrong or something like that, a fire could have broke out. So like I said, having a great home inspector is very good, because they'll point these things out to you, because who's buying a house and they know exactly how the switches and the electrical panel is supposed to look. Would you even look in the electrical panel? Would you even know that you're supposed to look for a 16-volt switch where the 20-volt was? You wouldn't know to look at. That is good to have somebody that can tell you that. So it's very crucial to have a good home inspector. Now, although my home was in pristine condition, there was a few flaws, just a couple flaws. Like I mentioned, it was the issue with the electrical panel. The garage door, it wasn't bolted down properly to the roof of the garage, as well as the basement walls had a lot of cracks in them, which could lead to a lot of leaks during like winter or any time it rains. That was very menial, wasn't a lot of major issues, which they did fix because they were pointed out. So I was able to tell them, hey, there's some of the issues that occurred, and they were like, sure, we will fix these issues and make sure that everything is good. Now, like I said, finding things that are wrong with your house, it can give you a lot of leverage towards getting these things fixed, as well as getting some money off the house, etc., etc. So it is essential that you try to find as many issues wrong with the house, and it also can change your actual kind of thought of whether it makes sense to get the house. Maybe you found that the house has a bad foundation or something like that. Does it actually make sense that you still go through with the transaction? Because long term, a bad foundation on a house, it's going to cost you maybe a lot of money to fix that. So though you want to still go through the actual transaction, that's basically why we do these home inspections. Now, after you've done your home inspection and you calmly wait for the home inspector to come up with his report, because he's taken numerous pictures and he's tallied a lot of information to make this report, the next thing is you want to get your home appraised. The appraisal is essentially the bank's way of finding out if the amount of money that they're giving you is more or less the actual value of the home that you're buying. That's basically what it is. They essentially want to make sure that you're not overpaying for something. So it doesn't make sense that a house is appraised for $200,000, yet you're asking for a $400,000 mortgage, because your house does not equate to that $400,000 mortgage. See what I mean? Just make sure that you're not getting scammed for a home value. So long term, it makes sense to get an appraisal. Now, a qualified appraiser, they typically create a report based on visual inspection, using recent sales of properties on your block or in like similar properties in the actual area, current market trends, aspects of your home. So maybe it has a patio, it has a nice backyard that can increase the value, as well as if the house was newly renovated, the house was newly rehabbed, that can increase the value. Floor plan, square footage, that usually determines the actual property's appraisal value. So depending on your area or other factors, it can more or less improve your home value. Let's say you're downtown Brooklyn. Obviously, it doesn't really matter how your house looks, how big it is. Usually the home value for a place in downtown Brooklyn is going to be much higher just based off the location. That can be the same thing for your home. If your home is in a better neighborhood, a higher class neighborhood, essentially the home value will go up just based off that. By this time, your appraisal has been done and your home inspection has been finished. Now you've gotten the report. You can read through the report and just make any assumptions, read through it, make sure that everything looks good. Now during this actual part, this is where a lot of the actual transactions as well go under, because a lot of people find some underlying issues wrong with the actual house and they're like, okay, this doesn't really make sense for me to actually go through, so I want to stop this transaction like right now. And that's why it's essential to have a good home inspector to make this certain, because long term, let's say you find a very big issue and you're ending up paying a mortgage, not only a mortgage, but you're actually paying for the repair of this actual issue, you end up spending more money that you intended to actually spend, which would suck. Now, more or less during this actual section, they usually have some type of negotiations where the actual seller will go forth and repair some of the issues, or they will compensate the buyer for those actual repairs to have it get done on their time. Or they'll basically negotiate, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense for us to go through with this, so we'll cancel the transaction. Either one or the other is done. They usually either repair it, negotiate some extra money towards like some seller's concessions and stuff, or they just cancel the whole transaction entirely. Now, if the home inspection is good, everything came back all right, you've negotiated some seller's concessions, or they have agreed to actually repair some of the issues that came forth, then you're all good to going towards the next step, which is to get your home insurance. Now, home insurance is important because it makes sure that just in case anything occurs, that you are prepared with it to pay for it with your home insurance. Things do arise and accidents do happen, so you just want to make sure those bases are covered. Now, it's very essential that you find a good insurance agent, good insurance company that not only gets the job done, provides good customer service, but they cover every single portion of your house that you may need. Now, most of the time, the agent will always have somebody they readily work with, but at this point, you want to just kind of compare quotes to see how much each one is charging, as well as if you already have car insurance. Usually, if you go ahead and get home insurance, you can bundle them and it could save you some money. So it's always good to shop around, just look at different quotes. So just make sure that you aren't being overcharged, as well as compare their policies and make sure that they all add up. Maybe one is cheaper, but maybe it doesn't have the same amount of items that the higher price policy pays for. Just keep that in mind. Now, once you've gotten that insurance policy signed and dated, you want to go ahead and you want to send that over to the underwriter, because that is going to be actually involved in your actual mortgage payment. It's a part of the mortgage payment. Now, a lot of people just think that the mortgage payment is you just paying for your actual house, which is farther from the case. I actually learned, I was a little late bloomer, but I actually learned that there is actually 4 costs that are they're put into your actual mortgage payment. Now, these 4 things are principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Now, principal is the actual repayment of the loan that you took out. The interest is obviously the profit that the lender is making from you paying for that loan. So any type of interest that is accruing that you're paying back is money in the lender's pocket. Taxes or property taxes are a cost that usually everybody has to pay when involved with a property. Usually it is very overlooked, but it is very important because if you do not pay this, they can, or the town can, put a lien on your house and put you through the foreclosure process. So you want to make sure that your taxes are getting paid. But usually towards the beginning of your mortgage, before you even pay it off, usually all these costs are put together. So when you pay that full mortgage price, usually a third-party aggregator is sending the different parts of that mortgage payment to the different people, so they are getting paid. And obviously the last part is the insurance. So the home insurance, it makes sure that just in case anything happens with the house, that it is covered. So that is usually going to the insurance company that you put the policy out for. Now, once you've gone ahead and done this, the next thing that you want to do is you want to go ahead and make your closing date with your actual attorney. You usually want to do this a bit early in the process because schedules can be misconstrued or people can be busy. So the earlier that you do it, the better, because don't you want to get this house? Don't you want to just get this whole process done and over with so you can go and walk into your brand new house? I know you do. So go ahead and get that scheduled so you can go ahead and get it out the way. Now, you usually with this, you want to tell your agent as well as your attorney so they can work together on this to make sure that they choose a day that not only they both can be there, but a day that you can be there as well. So you just want to have them work together, and that's why it's important that usually all parts or members of your real estate team, they usually know each other and they work closely with each other, because a team that works together, things actually happen faster. When you don't have to singly keep going and talking to every single person individually, when they can all just come together and talk to one another, things tend to get done a bit faster, especially if you aren't always readily available or somebody else isn't readily available. Having a whole team talk to each other is going to just get things done. Now, usually during this time, your attorney needs to have some files completed before the actual closing, and usually before you even close, the underwriting process is finally complete, so you have been processed and they will give you those funds for the actual transaction. So hoorah, that is a great portion of this actual process as well. Now, usually before the actual closing date, the next thing that you want to do is you want to go ahead and get any utilities and stuff like that switched into your name. Now, this is also going to depend on your actual housing structure. If you were to get a multifamily, which you intend to rent out some floors in there, you may want to just keep those floors empty or whatever and not switch your name over to those, and only switch your name over to the one that you intend to live in. If you expect to have high turnaround and you expect to fill that vacancy relatively quick, doesn't make sense that you switch the utility over into your name just to have it switched 3 to 5 days later. Just doesn't make sense. So depending on the structure of the actual deal, if you're gonna get a multifamily, switch it accordingly. But if you're just getting a single family or something like that you're only gonna live in, makes sense to just switch all the utilities over into your name. Now, after you've done this step, you're essentially just waiting for the closing date. Now, this is probably gonna be one of the biggest parts of your life, one of the most essential and most exciting parts of your life. So just keep counting down and just waiting for that day to come, because it's coming. Now that day has finally come. It's closing day. You're about to be a homeowner. How do you feel? Do you feel good? You should, because look at this whole process that you've went through. You've gone through a lot of hoops, you've jumped through a lot of obstacles to get here, but you're finally here. You're here on closing day. And on closing day, you need to essentially bring that closing cost check. Usually your underwriter will have told you how much you need to bring to closing to actually close, as well as you need to bring your phone to take a picture after you finish closing, and you can have that good nice picture in there. Now usually during closing you're gonna have this big huge stack of papers that you need to sign, but just make sure you read through everything fully. They're just gonna read you off all the prices associated with the mortgage, and usually your attorney and your agent are usually there not only to just hand you your keys and to make sure that any final paperwork is signed properly and all that type of stuff, but they also gotta get their payment too. Like after the people release their money, they get their closing costs and stuff. Some of the actual closing costs is some of their payment, so they're just there to get paid, which is good because they did help you through this whole process, so they do deserve to get their little bready bread, so that's good. When I tell you, this was like one of the most happiest days in my life, because not only was it kind of like a stepping stone in my life, but it kind of marked the step into an actual real estate journey that I've been trying to do for so long. Like, this was absolutely amazing to me, and it kind of is still shocking that I actually was able to take this step, because from a lot of people that I know, they're kind of like very scared to do this, but I was like, I need to just stop talking about it and actually need to do something about it, because I want to be successful and I want all of you to be successful, and I also wanted to kind of show people that if I can do it at my age, you can do it as well. So I kind of wanted to lay down that kind of groundwork and let it be known and shown that it is possible. But after you signed on the dotted line, congratulations, you are now a homeowner. And you should be very proud of yourself, because you definitely deserve to be a homeowner. Now, a few things to keep in mind is usually you don't have to pay the first month of mortgage, because usually you have prepaid for that in your closing costs or in your mortgage payment. So you do have some breathing room just in case you're waiting for a paycheck to come in, etc., etc. But usually involved with the underwriting process, they do need you to have at least 3 to 6 months of actual mortgage payments in your bank account, just in case like anything happens, you lose your job, you can pay for the next 3 to 6 months. So keep that in mind as well. That month is also going to give you a lot of time to go ahead and find some new tenants. So if you're trying to house hack like me, you're not actually paying for the mortgage payment. It's actually coming from their rent, which it makes sense. So you want to go ahead, the next step is to go ahead and find some actual tenants, but I'll probably save that for another video because I've spoken a lot already. But now let's go over what actually has gone through in this actual process. Step 1, once your offer is accepted, you need to go ahead and call your real estate team. Let all of them know that your offer has been accepted, and they all will usually give you some type of task to complete. So go ahead and call your real estate team. Next, you need to get your earnest money in as soon as possible. Contact your agent and attorney, let them know that you have your earnest money ready. Let them know, do I need to have it in a cashier's check? Do I need to have it in a regular check? Just find out the form of payment and get it to the seller as soon as possible. You want to avoid any type of slowdowns in the transaction. Next, you want to send all your information that is needed to the lender so they can complete the underwriting process. The quicker and faster that you can do this, the quicker and faster the underwriting process can occur, and the quicker that you can actually get the closing done, because usually that is what they're waiting for. They're waiting for the okay that you got proof that the funds are going to go through. So get this done ASAP. Next, you want to go ahead and schedule your closing date with your attorney. You want to do this as early as possible because sometimes these closing dates get backed up, and the quicker and faster that you do it is the quicker and faster you can actually get a date for yourself, so you know how long you'll physically be waiting. Next, you want to do the house inspection to make sure that the house is copacetic and everything is all good, and if the house is still worth getting. You want to see if there's any underlying issues with the house, so you can potentially get some money off, or you can have the actual seller do some repairs. That is very vital that you do this, because you do not want to get stuck footing the bill for something that was unexpected or something that you didn't even know was wrong with the house. Next, you want to go ahead and do your appraisal, which will dictate how much your house is actually worth. Now, after you've gotten your report back, your house inspection report, you want to go ahead and just make any repairs that you want to make done very vocal to the actual seller, so they can get that fixed and done for you. And as well as you can also negotiate some of that money off of the actual housing price, or add some seller's concession, whichever you guys see more fit. You go ahead and do that. End goal is to save some money on the actual transaction. Next, you want to go ahead and get your home insurance policy done, which is going to help you cover any costs or any unexpected emergency costs, just in case anything happens with your home. Then you want to go ahead and get those utilities switched over to your name. You're only going to switch over the portion that you are actually going to pay for. So if you're only going to be staying on your floor and you expect to maybe pay for the water for the whole entire house, get those utilities switched into your name. Nevertheless, if you have some tenants coming in, I would keep the actual utilities like empty, or don't switch it over until you actually have rented it out, and then you have them switch it into their name. Last and final thing, it is closing day. Congratulations, you have gotten your new home, and I'm very proud of you, because this is a new exciting step in your life and your first step into real estate. Now, if you are still here with me, this was an absolute joy to make. Like, this whole entire journey was an absolute joy to film and actually be able to share my experience with you. Not only share my experience, but actually educate you on the actual process, because a lot of people aren't doing this. They're actually just charging you to learn this process, which I feel like it's dumb. Like, everybody should be able to have access to this type of information. Now, I'm not asking much from you. I'm not asking you to pay for anything. I'm asking you to leave a like. Leave a like on this video. Let us subscribe to this channel. Help me out. Help me get this information out to more people, because I want to be able to share my experiences and my knowledge with a lot of you, so you can do what I'm doing. You can go ahead, you can create generational wealth for you and your family, because this is attainable. This is absolutely possible. So I want to show everybody that it's possible. So go ahead and go and like and subscribe to my channel. And be sure to go and share this with anybody that you know. Let's go ahead and get this video to 100 likes. That's all I'm asking. 100 likes. This is not that much. Alright? Knowledge is honestly power. So let's go ahead and let's share that knowledge with everybody, so everybody can be powerful. Thank you again for watching. I'm Brandon Young, and I'll see you in my next video. Peace.